All right, welcome, guys. Welcome to the Florida Hockey Bros podcast. We got another episode. My brother Daryl across the screen there, and I'm David. I'm going really fast because we have a lot of stuff to get to. Florida Panthers fall 8-0 to the Seattle Kraken and the Vancouver Canucks. Back-to-back shout-outs. Not a good look. A lot of inconsistencies with the finishing and the scoring in this team, which has been there since last season. I already saw some people trying to blame Maurice for it. I think all the Fire Maurice guys are coming back because of the offense, but I think it's more of a personnel problem. And I would actually say that Cito needs to, and I'm sure he is. I mean, we have one of the smartest GMs in the league. I think he is looking at it and he's been evaluating guys and he's not scared to pull the trigger. And anyway, we'll get into what the team needs going forward. But yeah, the last two games have been a little bit different in the way they've played. I think against Seattle, they looked awful. The effort wasn't really there. But last night, the team played well. The first and third period, they had 15 shots in both of those periods. Vancouver had 18 shots only last night, and we outshot them 15-1 in the third, and we couldn't score. So clearly there's more of a finishing issue. A lot of, basic shots to the chest of the goalie, no creative play in the offensive zone, no quick passes. There's no one-timers. Like, how many rushes have we seen? How many, one-timers have we seen? Barkov used to score those on the power play all the time. And Tkachuk, I mean, we got to talk about Tkachuk. I know you mentioned that before we started recording. So anyway, where do you want to start? I know there's a lot we got to talk about, so I'll let you kind of decide where you want to start, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, man. I mean, people, it's frustrating, obviously, and it's not a good look. The last two games, the team has not been consistent. The Kraken game, they didn't show up, and Maurice said as much. And I know, the coach got to get them ready and all that, but at the end of the day, the players got to do it. It's got to show up. This is a mature team that went on that run last year. The players need to take it over, the leadership. Otherwise, Maurice is just going to get tired of saying the same shit. So they were feeling themselves after the 3 wins in a row, and went to the Kraken thinking they were going to dominate because, it was the Kraken. And, egg under your face. It happens to every team. And then yesterday, I thought, it's a combination of many factors, and this is why it's important to not, freak out. Lomberg, the first goal was 100% on Lomberg. And Maurice talked about, how they're making really dumb mistakes that the team doesn't make and that they're not allowed to make. And so they're gonna address that, and eventually some of these guys may get demoted or benched for a little while.
Yeah, the first 3 goals were off of turnovers.
All turnovers. And Lomberg had an opportunity to get it out. He first was in the neutral zone, threw the puck against the guy's chest, had to go back to get it, had a guy coming at him, and instead of flipping it out to the neutral zone, even ice it, man. He
does that all the time. I love Lomberg. Yeah, I love him as a fourth liner.
He stays there with the puck. He's not the biggest guy. He loses the puck because and then the guy goes in with a flat-footed defenseman like that. That should not have been a goal. The second goal, they lose the board battle. There's nobody covering the other guy on the front of the net. It's like our bottom pair and also our bottom players. Even Goldie on the game was saying the role guys got to be better. The first 2 goals on the road, they cannot happen. And you need to address that because in the playoffs, that's the kind of shit you cannot allow to happen. That's the kind of stuff that the dumb mistakes that Toronto make, that the Bruins make, that allowed us to get out of those series. So we are good at not making them. So I think it makes you feel like that can be corrected. Like we are a very solid defensive team statistically. And those guys will get addressed, and either they'll figure it out or they'll get demoted or moved at some point. So I'm not too worried about that, even though that's part of why. The other part of it is that we just naturally don't have the offense to overcome this stuff like we used to a couple of years ago. And I think fans are still stuck there where you can't have it both ways. You cannot.
That's a great point.
The team from 2 years ago is the Leafs today, right? And that's not a real team, right? That team in the playoffs will get spanked.
That's a great point because that season, that President's Trophy season, is what got a lot of. I don't want to say new fans, but More of the
get them
casual Florida Panthers
excited.
fans. Yeah.
And that the Leafs has been doing that. They've been winning overtime games. They've been coming back from a bunch of games. They lead the Leafs in comebacks, which the Panthers did 2 years ago. That does not work in the playoffs. So I don't want us to be that team either. I don't know that, we will talk about this later when we talk about the league and hiding awards and stuff. And like the Panthers cannot hide their deficiencies because they don't have the speed or the scoring to do that. Our guys are not the fastest guy, with a couple of exceptions of quick guys. And we don't have the most skilled one-on-one guys either, outside of Barkov and, maybe one or two other guys that at times can do it. But when you really break down the team, we just don't have that. And for whatever reason, Lusty, Lundell have not taken a step from a scoring perspective. They have been actually solid two ways on the boards, which it is important. And I think that's what's been emphasized. But Lusty needs to score. And Lusty played on the second line when Bennett was out, didn't produce much. So that's holding other people back. Cousins is still like just being floated around, has 2 goals in 29 games. He's a waste of time, waste of space. It's -6. I don't, and I know he did stuff in the playoffs, but at the end of the day, with the new guys we got, like Stanley, Lawrence, Gadjevich, I just don't see Cousins fitting this team. I think he has to go at some point, probably by the deadline. Kachuk is really struggling, and I think part of it, he had a better game yesterday. The second line was better, but I think that he just so you know, he's on pace to score 14 goals and 56 points right now, which is not what he's going to end up with, but that's terrible. Wait, I can't hear you, David. You're muted.
All right, here we go. What the hell happened?
Yeah, what were you saying about?
He's one of 2 forwards, Kachuk, that has over 100 shots and less than 10% shooting percentage.
Yeah, no, his shooting has been terrible. And the power play, mainly the power play, where he's really, really stunk it up in terms of not just, and it's a combination of things. It's like sometimes the breaks don't go your way. The rebounds haven't been there for the Panthers. I see a lot of teams get easy rebounds. I mean, we see the Leafs get like the most easy rebounds in overtime, or, with like 10 seconds left in the game, which they've had like 3 times this season. And he just falls on the guy's stick wide open. Whereas our rebounds always seem to go to the corner. Yesterday the commentators were talking about it. Randy Moller was saying like the rebounds just go to the corner all the time. They don't stay there. So but also the shot quality is terrible. Like Bennett was sending it wide. Verhage was shooting into the guy's stick. Like, and Kachuk was setting up guys yesterday pretty well. And
Kachuk had a really good game last night.
Yeah, he did. He had an excellent game, and it's not showing the stat sheet. But that's the thing. Like. And he got a message. He was practicing on the third line before Lundell was out. So I think the lines have to get reshuffled. But I think Maurice was trying to send a message to him to get it going. And, Maurice is just the type of coach that doesn't panic. He's not Keefe. He's not Jim Montgomery. He's not going to shift lines from get a game unless he senses a pattern or unless he senses that things are building up. Now, with these last 2 games, he's probably starting to worry a bit. We'll see with Edmonton if they have another game where they get spanked. Then by the Calgary game, I think you might see before they come back, you might see some reshuffling again. You might see him cut down some ice time. You might see him, make a change. The other thing with us is like we haven't tested many alternatives because we've actually, after that initial wave, we have been healthy. So we haven't had to call up some of the kids. We haven't had to reshuffle some of the lines, which I think speaks a little bit to the stability, but also stubbornness of the team and trusting these guys. And I have to say, the record is still solid. They're still in a playoff spot. It's still early in the season. And much like we follow like the frustrations and read the stats, like the team is doing that times 10. Like Maurice and Cito talk every day. Like they look at the stats. They have advanced stats teams. They have scouts. They have all these people. They know what's happening. They know how the kids are playing. They're planning. But they're not going to panic. And that would be a mistake. That instability actually long-term impacts your team. And we've seen it with the Leafs. We've seen it with the Bruins when they panic, when they were up 3-1 and they lose one game and they panicked and changed all the lines, even the defensive pairings. And I do think it kind of cost them. That 7-5 game we won at home, game 6 or whatever it was against the Bruins, which was an anomaly in that series, was because Montgomery's changed a bunch of the lines. And I think he freaked out and it opened the game up. So all to say that I think it's obvious what the issues are. The underlying numbers are really, really strong still. Like we are the top 5 team when you include offense and defense. And expected goals, we should be a top scoring team in the league. We have 108 expected goals for and only 85 scored in all situations. That's ridiculous.
3.49 expected goals last night. 0. 0 winning. Three.
Yeah.
Over 3. That's
So
I've never seen that.
2 things about that. One, the dam will open at some point because we do have enough skill to score, and we did last year. We were one of the top scoring teams in the East and in the league, so it is there for us. Like some of the tips will start going in, Kachuk will get going, Lustrine might get a few. These guys will eventually get on a little run and get hot, and if they don't, then the team will address that in a bigger way in terms of making changes in personnel.
Yeah,
I also think the other thing is that I've wanted Cedar to like trade Cousins or try to find a third liner, but the truth is that he has to be careful with the moves because he has 3 guys he needs to figure out what's going to happen. And these are big contracts with Forsling, Monter, and Reinhardt. And he may need to trade 1, maybe even 2 of them, depending on what they want by the deadline. And if you're going to do that, you need to really build toward that and plan toward that and not rush it now and make a move where you're taking away a pick or taking away a guy. And then later you need to get rid of another guy and see what you can get back. So you also have to be strategic. And since if the team were out of a playoff spot, you will see a lot more desperation or like on the bubble, like last year. But right now, you kind of, and this is a West Coast trip. These are not divisional rivals. You can afford to lose the next 2 and still be in the wild card probably. And then sort of start to think about, okay, do we need to make a shift after the holidays? But I think for now, their approach is probably going to be to be like, all right, guys, like, can we figure this out? Can the players dig themselves out of this? Can we start putting some goals in? Can we be a little bit more responsible defensively? Can we surprise? Can we beat Edmonton? Can we go in there, and win and beat Calgary or whatever? So I think that we just have to kind of see how the next couple of weeks play out to the holidays, and then we'll have a better idea, and we'll be closer to like halfway into the season about what they need to do. And I think by January, we'll know whether Cedar needs to make a move, forget about the other 3 guys, like he needs to make a move, or whether the team has corrected it and figured out the scoring. Because that, if we can correct that, the numbers come back our way, the way they should, we'll continue to be a top team. And the good news is that the defense is for real. Like the structure works. Like we are one of the best defensive teams in the league, and that in the playoffs is incredibly valuable. It actually helps Bob. So anyway, like they're in a funk. They're in their own heads. It's obvious. Yesterday they played better. They had all this stuff. It's not working. They need to just have 1 or 2 games where they dig themselves out and then feel themselves, and it will flow a lot more. But it's obvious, like a lot of these guys are having down years, and things aren't clicking to the level, and the power play has been just dreadful. So in terms of the actual scoring, so yeah, man, it's 2 games. Like we also, it's early in the season. You can't if we overreacted to everything, the team will be a mess. So I just think long term, it's clear Cousins has to go. The defense has to be figured out. Belinsky's, Mahura, are they going to play? Are they going to play? Is it Kulikov long term? Is OEL going to get traded? Is he going to stay for the playoffs? That will have to be get figured out. But yeah, man, offensively, we need to start getting tips, rebounds, better shot selection. We had that one game where we scored a bunch of goals shooting up high, and then we seem to lose it again.
Yeah. I think there's the macro, the micro. I think on the macro, there's clearly a scoring problem, but also, like you mentioned, you have to have patience because much like, your point on Zito makes a lot of sense. You're not going to just make a crazy trade right now. I think the only thing you can do right now is shuffle some of the lines, maybe bench a guy or 2, bring up Sortif and Mackey for a game or 2 back home, just to kind of send a message to those guys. Maybe you put Kachuk on the 3rd line. You bring up, Mackey to the 2nd. You kind of just shuffle things out. I think that, you don't make a move until you're ready to actually make a move. And that's why, like, it makes sense to wait to the deadline. You're going to get much more value for someone like Reinhardt if it's not willing to resign for a reasonable amount. You can probably get something, maybe even more for a guy like Montour, a scoring defenseman. All that type of stuff. So I agree with you there. I think that, it's just 2 games. It's just that they've been shutouts. And that's the frustrating part, I think. Especially last night was very frustrating because you could feel like it could have been 2-2 after the first, and it should have been, right? You have Barkov had a really good chance. Verhage had a backhander that he just kind of rushed, but the open net was there. If he goes up high, Kachuk, I think, tried like 2 between the leg goals. He missed like an open net on one of them. Like, I get that part of it. I don't think that it has to be some crazy change for it to start clicking. It's just depth scoring. The third line has been absolutely nothing. They've provided nothing this year other than just be solid on defense. And that's something that Lundell and Lusty will always give you, especially in the playoffs. That's very valuable. That's why you keep those guys around. That's why Lusterinen was extended, not for his scoring, but for what he can do in the playoffs. It's why you should maybe try to extend Bennett at some point, and maybe he becomes our third line center in the future if Lundell takes off, like we talked in the past. All those things all those things matter, and it makes a lot of sense. For me, just watching them, just not looking at the stats, it's just the lack of playmaking and opening up the ice in the offensive zone. It's a lot of I don't know what the stats say, but a lot of our shots just get blocked. I mean, we had like 40 shot attempts after like a period and a half yesterday or something like that. It was crazy.
And I think it's a lack of quickness and the lack of movement and fluidity in the offense.
Yeah.
I have to say, I know that there's a lot of the Fire Maurice clowns out there. Always, like, every time we have a couple bad games, they come out of under the rocks that they live in. But what's funny is that when you look at the underlying numbers in the system, it is proof that the coaching staff is elite. Like, actually shows you that their system works. We're getting a ton of chances. We're protecting on defense pretty well. And what does us in is the mistakes, not the structure. And so it stands out when Lomber makes a really bad mistake. It stands out when another guy, it's like, missed an assignment. And we don't have the goaltending. Like, Bob is not the type of goalie that stops those kinds of shots that Vasilevsky is. Like, I mean, yesterday Edmonton had like 57 shots, and lost the game because Vasilevsky stopped 53 of them. Bob usually is not that. He's not that. He's not big. He's not going to stop that. The guy who's scoring on the backhand, like, Bob was down, like,
Yeah, he was very lazy on that second goal. And I don't know if you saw the
he could have attacked it. I saw it. But
the third goal, what happened, man? Like, he does not do that. That's
I know. But again, it might be better for all these mistakes to happen in the same game and get out of your system. But I also do think that we have to understand that I am confident about our system. I am confident that we are a good forechecking team, that we're excellent defensive team, that guys know their assignments, they know their roles. When we are our best, we can do like really, really good things. Yesterday, like you said, 15-1 shots in the third period against Vancouver, who's considered a top team and a great defensive team. And we had nearly 3.5 expected goals on the road against them. That's legit. That is actually really, really good. And that shows you that your coaching staff has the team prepared to play a style that can dominate another team, which you cannot say about a bunch of other teams. Like, Detroit doesn't dominate games. Detroit is scoring at an incredibly high level. So they put up a lot of goals and key, but they're scoring like 15 goals above expected, like some shit like that. So that is not a team whose system, or maybe personnel, like, they don't hit a lot. They're not physical. Like, in the playoffs, I want to see them, but they might get out of a run with some scoring if they get hot, but they could be like the Devils last year, which, got out of the first round and they got spammed by Carolina because Carolina is a good forechecking team. And so I don't think we need to be loosey-goosey. I don't want us to all of a sudden become the Leafs. First, we don't have those players, and that's just the truth. And second, that's not who we are right now. So I'll talk more about like what I think. Like, this is a good segue for the next topic. But what is it that we actually need? Like, how do you make this team that's already pretty good even better? And I think there's an opportunity to do that. And there are two things in my mind to be able to do that. But anyway, we could lose the next two, and I still would have the same opinion about where we are, except maybe you do need to shuffle some lines, maybe bring up a guy or two. And, injuries will happen. I mean, Mackey and Sordiff, I suspect we'll see their faces again this year because, top six guys might be out for some games at some point. But yeah, man, at some point, Cousins and Lundberg, they may need a benching because they also are not producing. Like they have 2 points and 2 goals or whatever each, and they're better than that. They were better than that last year. And if you're not scoring, and then you're -6 like Cousins or your Lundberg turned it over yesterday, at some point I want your ass sitting for a game or two and let's sort of play on the fourth line.
Yeah, and yeah, I think to be fair to Cito, because I keep thinking about this now that they're actually struggling to score. Well, as a GM, you should have kind of seen this coming. We weren't a high-scoring team in the playoffs, and if we are who we are in the playoffs, then that's not gonna count in the season, because during the season you need to score 3+ goals almost on a nightly basis to win those games, unless you have you're gonna be a shutdown defense. But I understand like the thought process, and I think a lot of it is just depth scoring. I think if our third line, if Lusty and Lundell have been maybe contributing a little bit more, it would be easier. Last night was one of those games where you just needed, one of those lines to kind of pick it up. Everybody was a negative except for the first line, including Forsling and Ekblad. So Ekblad, Forsling, Barkov, Rodriguez, and Reichardt were the only even. Everybody else was -1 or -2. Which is very telling. It kind of tells you where the issues are, and it's just depth scoring. We talked a lot about getting maybe a top scoring winger on the top 2 lines, and that's fine. But I think it's just the depth, and I think that your second line has to produce at some point. Bennett, Verhaeghe, Tkachuk they have to produce. They were our best line last year.
If I put my GM hat on, the way that I'm looking at it, and I think Cito's doing it the right way, actually. I think, first of all, people need to remember this. Like, we forget, like, our narratives are so narrow. Cito tried to get Bertuzzi in the offseason. He wanted Bertuzzi. He was in the running. The Panthers were one of the finalists, 3 or 4 teams to get him. He couldn't give him the $5 million. We didn't have it. The only way to do that is to trade Verhaeghe. And at that point, you're trading guy for guy. So, and the main reason is Cito has a $10 million contract that he inherited from Bob, a $7.5 million contract from Ed Blatt, who didn't even play to start the season. The cap not going up, and he has no money to give out to free agents right now. So he tried to convince Bertuzzi to take a pay cut, come play for a year, put up some points. Maybe that would have been a better choice for him, given how things have gone with the Leafs. Who knows? He tried to do the same with Tarasenko. Tarasenko got $5 million from Ottawa. He couldn't give him 5. He was offering like 2.5 or some shit, because he could move other pieces to make that happen, but he couldn't go beyond that. Tarasenko couldn't come, but we were in the running for Tarasenko to the very end. And now he tried to get Kane, and we were one of the last 2 teams with the Red Wings to get Kane. Again, probably had to offer less than even what he got, which is 2.75 or whatever. Cito at this point probably offered like 1.5 or something. So, because you can just trade one guy and then make that money happen, but you also cannot hurt your team just for the one guy, because that guy can come in and be cold. That guy can come in and not work out, or that guy can come in and get injured. You don't want to give up 3, 4, 5 mil and move another piece, lose a defender or whatever, just when it comes to the playoffs. So he's tried, man. He knows we need the scoring. That's why he's going after these guys. Most of these guys I just mentioned are not good defenders. They don't actually fit the team culturally from a defensive perspective, but he knows that, like Verhaeghe, and like there's certain guys that you just need there to score. So that lets me know that he knows, and he will try to make that work. Number 2, he also needs to be able to get rid of a couple of contracts and the cap going up to then build around some of that. And the kids, we could have rushed them. We could have Sordev or Mackey or both up here now. I don't know that would have been better. I think that would have made us more liable defensively early on in the season, and we needed that defense to get us through, and that actually got us all the points we got, because we haven't scored as much as we should have. And those guys would not have provided that, because even the AHL, the first 10 games they played the season, they didn't look that great, and now they've gotten really, really strong and playing top minutes now in the AHL. And that's what Marie said, and Cito knows. Like, those kids are there for next year. We need them next year because of the cap, and they're still cheap, and they'll be ready to play 2 ways, bang, and score. And they got skill. Tons of skills. So I think the kids will be there next year, and that between them and some tweaks, the team will be a lot more skilled next year and more offensive. And I think that's coming. This year, they needed Lusty to take off. They needed Lundell to take off, and that hasn't happened. The other good news about that is that you get to evaluate them. You get to see them. Maybe Lundell needs to be traded. Maybe Lundell needs to play on the wing. Maybe his extension now needs to be cheap if he wants to stay, because you're not providing what we need right now. Maybe 2 more years, but at 2.5 or some shit. So that's kind of what the EM is thinking about. You cannot think about today, man. You got to think about the playoffs. You got to think about tomorrow, and you're still in it. So don't panic. I think we'll be a slightly different team after the deadline with hopefully a little bit more bang on offense. And next season we'll have a lot more skill. But this year his hands were tied, and he tried. He tried Bertuzzi, he tried Tarasenko, he tried Kane. He knows we need another winger in the top 6. And then the depth scoring, again, Lundell and Lustig needed to be tested. If they're not those guys, then Lustig maybe just needs to play third line center, because he's very good for that. And then bring a couple of wingers that, maybe it is Mackey, or it is Sordev, or it is like another free agent, move on from Cousins and bring a guy from, Kyler Yamamoto or whatever, like a guy who can skate and shoot. So anyway, I'm confident that they know and that they're going to make the right moves. But we just have to be patient. That's the hardest part, just don't stay up for these late games. Maybe it might not be a good road trip.
Yeah. I stayed up way past the game last night.
Wait to come back home.
To be honest, I skipped the whole second period. I checked the score a couple times, but I was just kind of browsing stuff late at night. And then I watched the third, most of it. And then after that, I kind of stayed up a little bit, but I try to stay away from like social media and stuff after bad losses like this, because I just had to like block a guy right now on Twitter because they're doing the Maurice thing.
Fans, man. It's funny how they do the Maurice thing and then never. What is it with Panther fans that don't want to hold the players accountable? Is it because I've just been trained to like
because they love the players? Yeah, they love the players. Like more than half of them would.
They love Huber though. Look how he's doing.
More than half of them would take Huber the back now, even at that.
He's not a good player. He's not a serious player. I don't want him anywhere near my team. He's not a good leader. He's a cancer in the locker room. He's a guy who doesn't really try or care, and all he cares about is playing with skill. And he put up numbers with the Panthers because the Panthers never had expectations. He was terrible in the playoffs. And I don't want that guy. Like, why would I want, like, Kachuk could be struggling, but Kachuk will figure it out. Kachuk will win you playoff games. Huberdeau isn't going to do that. And look how he's playing. I mean, they've changed coaches. They've changed lines. He's terrible.
Calgary actually has been scoring.
Yeah, he has
this year. They're just terrible on defense and goaltending. But
they don't care. They're like the Panthers. They don't care to defend now. Yeah. Like the GM said at the beginning of the year, I just want them to play loose and whatever. Yeah, okay, yeah. Look how they play loose.
I think you kind of like just gauge where the team is halfway through the season when we get there. We've been shut out 4 times this year. Locked on Panthers. Armando tweeted I think last night or this morning. And they're all against Western Conference teams for whatever reason. Maybe it's just a style thing, or maybe
it's just scouting and it's
not being familiar. Yeah, it's not being familiar with those styles of play.
And not getting up for those games, man. I mean, that's also part of it.
And the Seattle game was a good example of that. I mean, Seattle just shellacked the Blackhawks last night 7-1. So maybe they're just starting to pick it up after that losing streak. And a lot of those things matter. When you play a team, you have to take into account how well they've been playing and what their situation is. Just like the Panthers. Like, I think tomorrow night it's a game where that first period needs to be like the hardest they've ever played. They need to just have like 20 shots, hit everybody. That's another thing. We lost a lot of physicality with Gudas and Mark Stahl not being on the team anymore. Last night, like there wasn't a lot of hitting. Like teams like the Canucks, the Leafs, you have to punch them in the mouth. You have to. Like in that first period, you have to kind of set the tone. And then everything else kind of falls into place with this team. But anyway, anything else you want to mention about the Panthers before we move on to other things around the league?
No, man. Just, the Bruins had those 3 games a couple of weeks ago where they, they allowed like 18 goals or whatever in 3 games or 17 goals in 3 games. The Lightning lost 4-1 to the Canucks, The game before, yesterday the Leafs were down 5-0 to Columbus, and they came back and all that. But that's 2021 Panthers. That's not a real game, and they played dreadful the first two periods, and just embarrassing, and could have been down 7 or 8-0. So that will happen, man. That doesn't mean these teams aren't like competitive teams. It's just we just have to hopefully get it right, maybe win one of the next two, and then try to get on the right track coming back home. It's kind of uneven schedule at home in the next few weeks where we get like one really good opponent, one shit opponent, one really good opponent, one shit opponent. So it'll be interesting to see how we manage that.
Yeah, and it's all about like streaks are very important in a long season.
Yeah.
So like we've had a 5-game winning streak, then 3 games after that. I think after that terrible loss to the Islanders. Yeah, I think the team will be fine. Like we have a lot of, like you mentioned, the system is there, the core is there. It's time to start producing and putting games away. That's another thing. We haven't been able to come back, and like I don't think we've come back in any game that we're down like 2 goals. Maybe we did at the beginning of the season. I don't remember, but yeah. It's just the finishing and the scoring. Like I said, the only thing that they can do right now in the next 10 to 20 games is just bring up Mackey and and hope that brings them a spark. If it keeps going this way, I think, like I just mentioned, Saturday's game, you cannot get shut out again. You cannot just score a goal. You have to come out hard, put that pressure on yourself as a player. And something that I forgot who mentioned this. I forgot if it was when the Blues fired the coach recently. There was some video of a coach talking about if your players can't get up for it themselves, can't get up for the games and can motivate themselves, then yeah, you're not going to win no matter how talented you are. So I hope that they kind of take this personally, the 2 shoutouts, and they start punching teams in the mouth, man. I think
and they have it in them, man. They have it in them. I mean, they try.
Yeah.
Montreux will get going. Montreux is a killer. He'll get going. Kachuk will get going. Some of the kids just gotta like get out of their own head, start shooting, and get it. It's tricky. And yeah, I'll say this: Edmonton is not as good as the last 7 or 8 games. I mean, the last is 7-4, and the Leafs. If you look at the advanced metrics when they were stinking, they were middle of the pack, lower half. They have been the best team points-wise the last 15 games. If you look at the advanced stats, they're exactly where they were in the beginning of the season. So that streak does not mean that team, and so I'll talk about that later when we talk about the hiding your mistakes. But
yeah, let's transition there. Actually, let's get right into that game, the Leafs game against the Blue Jackets last night. We were watching that before the Panthers game, and yeah, it was fun. It's funny, like I think after a while you are what your stats say you are in a way, except if you're the Leafs or a team like that you can kind of hide those mistakes. You mentioned that in the past. I know you're going to talk about that now. But right before the game, listening to the analysts, you hear, well, the Blue Jackets are top 3 5-on-5, bro. They're actually like top 3 scoring 5-on-5 in the league. They just the worst. Goals. Yeah. They're the worst, like 3rd period team in the league.
This is why offense doesn't. They play fast. They're young, so they play fast. Yeah. They got a lot of skill. It looks
youngest team in the league.
Looks pretty, but they're not a real team, right? They're not like a competitive team. Yeah, I think that there's 2 types of teams. The teams that can't hide who they are, like the Bruins and the Panthers this year, and a few. Tampa. Tampa's been struggling. The record's not great compared to their talent, because the bottom 6 isn't producing as much. Vasilevsky was out. He wasn't great when he came back. But I expect that to still be corrected over the long term, because of how good structurally they are, and they have that solid goalie. And I think Bruins will sort of hold steady. They'll finish 1st or 2nd in the Eastern Division. I think there are teams out there, the Red Wings, the Leafs, the Canucks to an extent. The Canucks are a lot more sound defensively, and Demko more than the defense, but they're being okay. But they're scoring at a very high rate, and the same with the Red Wings, same with the Leafs. And I think those teams can hide in the regular season a lot of the mistakes. And that, I don't like it because I saw one thing yesterday. I told you about it. I texted you about it. When Matthews ties game yesterday, and obviously that's a regular season fun thing. Like I'm not gonna try to poop on that.
It's a natural reaction.
If we came back down for nothing on the road, and I would have been at least we got the points, right? Like that's so. I'm not trying to poop on the fans or whatever. Like it's a fun. You can allow yourself one or two of those games in the year. What I don't like is one that this has been a pattern for them, and we see with Detroit as well. Detroit yesterday got dominated by Carolina. Carolina just couldn't score as much. Same as the Panthers, a very similar team, forechecking team. But you know that in a series with Detroit and Carolina, I would pick Carolina because I know that they can grind it out. And so the Leafs, when he scores, and you look at Sheldon Keefe on the bench, he had the exact same type of response and celebration that Maurice had when we beat the Bruins in the game set. I'm talking about he was laughing and like elated and red, and he hit the assistant coach. Like he was so like excited. Maurice did the same with Compton. Like he hit him when we won and that lets me know that this coach, I'm not saying don't celebrate. You as a coach can be happy that you tied the game and you're going to get the point at least. And, anyway. But the way that game had gone, as a coach, he should be petrified, because it wasn't just that they didn't get up for it. Because we didn't get up against the Kraken. We did not play as bad as the Leafs played yesterday against the Kraken. The game was right there for us. These guys were at home, and they knew, and everybody had been talking how this is a trap game, and they still not only didn't show up, but they could have been down like 7 or 8-0. They were making terrible turnovers, like just really bad habits. All of the bad things about the Leafs showed up in the first 2 periods. And just because you tied it, the coach, it's celebrating because, again, culturally over there, man, that is what matters. The shiny shit, get the points, get the crowd yelling, win the games, get in the playoffs. Like that is what they're trying to do. Beyond that, they're not serious. And it's been a ton of years for that. And a coach should not be celebrating that way after that type of a game. Part of him should be pissed that it even took that to happen, to be honest. And I've seen a lot of coaches in those kinds of games not even move. Yeah. As the players are going crazy and the coach is just there, okay, yeah, talking to the assistant coach about the next thing, like, because this is the kind of game where if I'm a coach after the game, I rip the guy's bait. The next day, I do not want to take away the positive energy, but you need to say, hey guys, like, let's not kid ourselves. Like, let's look at some video too. And so anyway, all to say that I don't ever want us to be that team again. And that's who we were in, 2 years ago with Bruno. And so anyway, I'm okay with us not being able to hide our warts, because all he does is highlight them for you, and you cannot hide them, and you have to fix them, right? You either get the team right or you make some moves to get the team right, and the fans can see it. So I don't mind that pressure. I don't mind fans being able to see it. Yesterday, a lot of people were like super happy, and even Dangle was like giving the Leafs a break on this one or whatever. And I'm like, that break you're giving them today is what's going to cost you the series in the playoffs, right? So, anyway, to me, just gonna say, I know that it's very frustrating and not fun to watch in this sort of version of the Panthers, but I just don't think this is going to be our version forever. So I'm okay with who we are. I'm okay with us not being able to hide. The fact that we're not coming back from down 4-0. We can come back from 1 or 2 down in the playoffs. We proved it last year. I'm not worried about that. And if the scoring is cold now, it may be hot when we need it to be hot. So anyway, not mad at it, man.
Yeah, that makes sense. Beyond that, Hurricanes are a little bit back on track. Carolina Hurricanes playing a bit better. I think their goaltending was like dead last in the league, or like 30th.
They were awful, and especially because it's out again. Yeah, he's always out.
Injury prone, and they're picking it back up. Tampa with Bassey back, I think they'll kind of rebound, but they're gonna be up and down. I think this season they might end up in a wild card, maybe with us. We'll see how that goes. We play them in the next few games. And yeah, I think I'm kind of just looking forward to the end of the road trip. I think last year we were like 0-4 on the first West Coast road trip. I think that was like the first time we kind of realized the team was struggling on offense. And it's kind of a pattern, but I think it makes a lot of sense why the Panthers will struggle on a West Coast road trip and a team like the Maple Leafs had a successful trip. And that's just because you're carried by your offense. On the road, you need your offense to kind of step up. And that's something that we'll kind of have to look back at the deadline when we're in the deadline and see what Zito decides to do there.
Well, the good news is that we've already done 2 West Coast trips. This one's a tougher one. The other one had Anaheim and the Sharks and all that shit. Now we have only one more left, I think in January, I want to say. So we actually finished.
Yeah, it's kind of tough. It's actually kind of tough. It's
Coyotes,
Golden Knights, and the Avalanche. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not as far. You're not going as far, and and in some ways that is actually better too for us, and also teams we care about. Like at least with the Vegas Golden Knights, we're gonna get up for that game. Colorado, we always get up for, and we've actually played well in their building. Coyotes are like a wild card this year, so it's hard to know what you're gonna get. You could get a terrible night or
they're playing better, but there's.
So anyway, one more trip, and then the last 2.5 months of the season, we don't need to go back there, which was similar to last year, and that actually helped us a lot because we went on a run. So all to say also that like this is the time for us to stink. This is the trip for us to stink. If this were happening at home, then I'd be worried. But we're against divisional rivals. We lost 4-0 to the Leafs and the Lightning. I'd be like, oh shit, we're in trouble. Because they should know better in those games. But anyway, we'll keep going, man. We'll see what happens. The one last thing I wanted to sort of touch on, man. It's like I know you watched the Checkers the other day a little bit, which I don't think you had done this season, and you got to see a little bit of Sorda from Mackey.
Yeah, first time I watched them play.
Yeah, and they play again tonight. I'm gonna watch them. And it's not fun to watch. Like the game is like a mess. Like the AHL it's a whole mess. It's very different from the NHL. But what I like is that what I'm excited about is that these kids have cemented their place on the first line. They've taken Lockwood and Asplund spots and everybody the veteran spots. And they're playing in who gets rotated is their other winger. So at times they had Mayhew, at times they had Kodorenko, at times they had Asplund. I think Kodorenko's the guy with them now. But Sorda is playing first line center, which is huge because he's got to kill penalties, power play, drive the play against the top lines. And AHL teams have a mix of like veterans, prospects, especially the top lines. So they're going against tough competition, and the last few runs, the last 2 weeks that they've gotten hot and played better has been against some really top competition on the East and for them. So I'm excited that they look, you said sort of looks like an NHLer, they're a lot more physical. They have the skill. And I think that preparation the rest of the season with the skill for next year, since they already kind of showed in preseason that they could make the team, these guys might come in next year ready to go. Like whatever they put them, Mackey's going to be top 6, sort of maybe middle 6 or bottom 6. Like I think they can plug in because there won't be like rookies, and even Benning, who's been playing a lot of minutes on the top pair and being more of a defensive guy and being a plus player this year, even though he's a small guy, and that's always been a concern. So I think 3 of those guys, I'm excited. I think they're going to compete for a spot, and I think they'll be ready to actually show up and not make a lot of mistakes or be beaten on the boards as easily. So just want to call that out. I think it's a smart move from Maurice and Cito. They said it. The kids need to play, and you can see why. They're just getting stronger and stronger, smarter, and they're kind of in leadership roles. They've gotten into scraps. Maggie got hit in the face the other day, sort of went to fight a guy. Like it was, they're playing like NHL players, and they stand out in their own team, even though a lot of these AHL guys have been there for a while. So you just want to call that out, man. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about Saushin being hot, coming back from injury. Davis still scoring on pace for over 50 goals. Bill Manis is having the same season that Easton Cowan and Fraser Minton had in Toronto. They're always talking about those guys. They're in Team Canada now.
Yeah.
And like Bill Manis is like one of our not top prospects, and he's like having the same kind of season and as they did last year, and I think he'll be sort of a depth guy for us going forward. So I feel great about our pipeline and what Cito has done just in like 3 years. I think we have enough to rotate. And then Devine also scoring. So Josh Davis and Devine are like pure scorers. Sauching is playmaker. Vermanis is a playmaker. And then we got Soder from Mackey and Benning kind of ready to go. And then we have Naus and McAllister, who I think are going to be starters next year in the AHL. And they'll prove whether or not they have it in them to make it into the team, a couple of years from now.
Yeah, and if Sordiff and Mackey work out for the team, for the Panthers, once they come up, then that gives you a lot of flexibility with the cap.
Yeah.
You don't have to be as desperate to trade Bob.
You can extend them for not that much money to start, yeah.
Yeah, so that's something to look forward to. All right, let's wrap it up. Let's look at the schedule real quick. Obviously, we got the Oilers tomorrow, and then the Flames on Monday. Obviously, if we win the next two, then you kind of just forget about the last two. Yeah. But that's gonna be tough. Maybe we go 1-1. I'm hoping we can win them both. And then beyond that, we go back home. We play St. Louis at home. That should be a win. And then we play Vegas, the Lightning, the Rangers. That's really tough. But I think we can pull 2 of those 3 out. And then after that next road trip that we talked about with Vegas and Colorado, we do have a 5-game, a five home game stretch that might do us some good with some of those matchups. And yeah, overall, we just need to stay in the playoff spot. Try not to slip into that wild card too much if we can avoid that, just to kind of give a little bit of wiggle room which is what we did to start the season. The last 3 or 4 weeks, we've been able to kind of be positioned in a spot where we can drop the last 2 and still we're basically in the same place. The Red Wings lose last night in regulation, so that no major loss there for the Panthers, and Toronto picks up a point, which I think we're tied with them in points now. They do have a game or 2 in hand, I think 2 games in hand. But I don't really care about that.
I don't want us to. I'm okay with Bruins and Leafs fighting for the top 2 spots. I would rather stay out of the wild card, but so maybe 3rd place. I don't want us to take that wild. Maybe let Tampa take that spot, or the Red Wings, or whoever. But so I would prefer for us to finish in the top 3 if we can. The one thing I'll say is, the schedule gets a lot better the second half of the season after January, with no more long road trips out west. And we got stronger last year. And, Ed Black and Montour will only get better, hopefully, and score. Kachuk has to get going. I mean, he won't play like this in terms of scoring the whole season. That's just mathematically not the way it works. And also, he's playing hard. It's not like Huberdeau, who doesn't give a shit. So, and we'll see Lundy and Lusty need to have better second half of the season. And then you'll see some moves. You'll see either Cousins get moved, or you see somebody get traded, and Cito try to do some stuff at the deadline. So I think we can have a much better second half of the season and build toward the playoffs. And everybody expected us to be a 500 team at best to start the season anyway, the first 2 months with everybody out. And we are much better than that for now. Yeah. So I guess you also see it as we've overachieved. And the fact that the underlying numbers say that we should be a top scoring team, let's just hope that they figure it out. And then when that starts to happen, we stay above water and then make that run. You also don't want to be losing like this the last month of the season, right? So again, if it's going to happen, let it happen now. And then by then we can get hot.
Yeah, and something to keep an eye on, if it comes to that, the last 4 games of the season is at home. They're at home. We play the Senators, the Blue Jackets, the Sabres, and the Leafs to end the season.
3 of those 4 games are kind of gimmies if they really try. Yeah.
Yeah. So
and the Leafs and the Panthers might be in the playoffs by that last game. So that last game might be a bunch of bench guys. That's when you see sort of a Mackey play.
Yeah, so 7 of the last 11 they're at home. We play the Leafs twice in a 2-week stretch. So, and we play the Bruins, we play the Senators. So if it comes to that and you're battling for a spot to end the season,
it'll be in our hands.
Yeah. We play the Lightning a ton yet, because we haven't played them in the past seasons. I think we usually play them to start the season twice. This year's a little different. So I think the schedule is not just favorable, but the matchups are ideal if you're still battling for a playoff spot, or even to get out of the wild card. I do think that it's not about positioning for me. I don't want them to like win the division or anything like that. It's not about that. It's more about getting, a good matchup in the playoffs. You don't want to play the Bruins again, I don't think. Even though they're not as good as last season, they're still defensively very, very good, and they have goaltending that's very, very good. I'd rather match up against the Leafs or the Lightning almost in a playoffs matchup for the first round, just to get that out the way, because we should be able to, beat those teams at this point. Tomorrow night, Panthers play the Oilers. They can score. They probably will score on us. So
their goaltending is bad and the defense bad. And the game we played at home against them, we exposed them. So I think my main concern is, that they have gotten hot and they're going to score.
Right.
So they're going to get their cookies. So can we just hang around and try to put them away?
Definitely. All right. We'll wrap it up there, guys. Hope you enjoyed the episode. We put out content every Friday. We'll keep doing so. And we'll recap. We'll recap the next week. We'll have the Oilers, the Calgary, and the Blues to talk about next Friday. And we'll see what the team is at by then and what the lines are and exactly what happens after this tragedy of this week. It's been rough. Just staying up. I think.
And whatever. Yeah, I'm not trying to like kill myself for these games. They're not gonna mean much in the big picture, even if we struggle. So anyway, if you've gotten to this point, which you probably haven't, but if you've gotten to this point and you're a Fire Maurice guy, like you're dumb. Stop.
Yeah. And to be fair, it's not like it's just a couple of guys.
I know.
That are bringing it back because that's what fans do. And if you're very passionate, it's very easy to get emotional.
Like,
and I was like,
learn the game a little bit. Like just be aware. Yesterday, I had to listen to Bunkus and McKee talk about the Leafs game and just rip into Sanson off the whole time about why they were down and why they allowed the goals. And I just kept thinking, like, yeah, he was not great at all. Samsonov left some.
Very passive.
Very kind of passive, but this is why these guys end up mentally like just leaving or not being able to play because you guys are just not giving them any breaks. And two, your defense and your forwards, like you said, what was that video of like, who was it? Nylander and somebody else breaking out.
So on the
scoring.
I think it was the second or third goal. I want to say it's the second. I'm not sure. You see, I forgot who it was from the Leafs. He shoots the puck around the boards so one of the forwards can pick it up. While he's doing that motion, you see Gregor, who's the one on the boards who should have received the pass. He just takes off before the pass is even made, and Nylander takes off with him. So it's like a 2-on-1, except the Blue Jackets pick it up, shoot it, and they score. I think it was the redirect. I think it was the second goal.
Yeah, so
it was super obvious. Like,
so like they don't talk about that. They don't talk about we're talking about Lumber giving a goal away. We're talking about the second goal, OEL not winning the board battle, and then whoever it was, Kulikov or Balinskis, whoever had to be in the front of the net wasn't there. Like that's Bob could have done better, but like that's not a Bob goal. Like
it was OEL. OEL turned it over. It wasn't like a terrible turnover. He was just kind of weak on it.
I mean, it is what it is. I'm just saying
it happens. It happens because we get a lot of chances that way.
We also should avoid a lot of those. So if you're going to break down those kinds of plays, Sanson wasn't great, but he's not the reason you lost, man. The reason you lost is your team didn't even try. You could have been down 8-0. He stopped some like point blank shots yesterday. So like rip your team. Be like, you guys didn't want to play defense. You're not being serious. Your forwards are never like going behind the net to retrieve a puck. Every time a defenseman gets a puck, you know what the forwards do? They launch forward. They're looking to break out. So what happens is the defenseman's left by himself. They turn it over. You give away the goal, and that's what happens to them against the Panthers. So they're still doing that shit. They don't care about defense at all. So anyway, man, it's just not a serious. The fans are dumb. Like they think they know, but they don't. They don't know. They just fixate on the one thing. Fans are good at fixating on the one guy or the one thing.
Yeah,
and never the one thing.
That's something that I can guarantee you guys we will not do on this podcast. We're not gonna fall into that trap of overreacting and blaming the one guy. And that's true. That's a fact. I think it's easy to game to game to just be like, oh, well, this guy didn't put in a good effort or whatever, or Bob was. I mean, if you really analyze it, Bob was heavily responsible for 2 of the 4 goals last night. But, I mean, we didn't score, so
Yeah,
you can't just...
If Lumber doesn't allow the first one and we scored a couple in the first, it could have looked like a very different game. So
yeah, at least you get a point or something like that.
Yeah.
All right. So hopefully we can pick up like 3 points out of the next 2 games, get at least an overtime loss. I mean, at this point, I'm kind of rooting for that on these trips. That's all you need to do. Get 2 games to overtime and then try to win the other 2. And if they come back home, you know, with a 3-2 record on this trip, it's not too bad. All right, let's wrap it up there, guys. We'll catch you all next week.